passion is to me is one of the main keys and ingredients to becoming a good leader. And even the bad leaders, some of those have passion, and that's, they're bad leaders from a social perspective, but they're passionate.
Hello, Business of Happiness Hive. I am so excited to bring this interview today. It is with Dr. Roon Dwinnells. Now, I found this incredible man through his book called Don't Pick Up All the Dog Hairs. And Dr. Roon is a pediatrician, and he is the CEO of One Health Ohio, which is a incredibly large conglomerate that he grew from nothing to now owners and employers of 200 people, serving the underserved children, the underserved population of this part of Ohio. He is so inspirational. His presence is just so inspirational because he shares with us in this episode really how he did this, how he found this enormous business success, how he taps into his passion and his purpose, not only as a leader, but also for himself. We're going to learn some tips and tools of what he does on a daily basis to tap into his own happiness and what that means to him. And he also shares with us in this episode some very personal stories about big failures, very, very big heartbreaks, and some very vulnerable moments, not only as a human being, but as a leader in healthcare, some big mistakes that happened and how he overcame them and what they fed back into his purpose for further growth. I know that if you are a leader of a business, if you are an owner or a doctor, chiropractor, dentist, veterinarian, this episode will have enormous value to you. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Roon Dwinnells. Hello and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and today we have with us Dr. Roon Dwinnells. Welcome to the podcast, Ron.
Thank you so much, Tarryn. I'm so glad to be here with you.
I'm so excited to have you here today. Today's going to be a great day because Ron and I just discovered something that we both have in common that we have a passion for, and that's for climbing tall mountains and reaching the top. And what a great metaphor for what you've done in your life. Now, we were talking about actual mountains. And so what are some of the mountains that you've climbed? What have you been doing that you really have enjoyed summiting some of those great peaks?
Well, most of the Western U.S. mountains like Rainier, Hood, St. Helens, we did Olympus, Whitney, Shasta. Shasta was our first mountain, and that was the reason we climbed Shasta was because I had read that it was supposed to be a good beginner mountain.
Oh,
well, it was one of the tougher mountains. Yeah, there's this area called Avalanche Gulch that you have to go up, and it's like this straight up thing. And, and as a novice mountain climber, I'm like, wow, what am I doing? How did I get myself into this? But yeah, so we've done all those. We've done Kilimanjaro. I've done Fuji, and we did Mount Elbrus a couple of years ago in Russia. But I had an accident. I fell and we didn't summit that one. But yeah, it's fun. And like you just said, it is a metaphor for life too, right? It's you go through struggles, you go through obstacles and so forth. And then you may reach the top, you may not, but if you do, boy, what a feeling.
Absolutely. And in life and in business itself is reflected in that same journey. And you've had some enormous successes in your business world and within the healthcare sector. Tell us a little bit, please, about your journey to introduce my audience to who you are in that regard.
Sure. So I'm a pediatrician. That's my educational training background. I went to school at University of Kentucky, did my residency locally at a local children's hospital here. And in my last year of residency, I was the typical, very idealistic young doctor type, and I felt really bad seeing a lot of these patients that came to the residence clinic who had no insurance, nowhere else to go, for healthcare. They would go to the ERs, to the hospital, but the continuity of care wasn't there. So anyway, I had read about a grant available through the federal government through HRSA. And I always liked writing. So I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. So I wrote a grant proposal to start what they used to call a safety net clinic. And in town here, I'm in Youngstown, Ohio. And so I wrote it, and I was successful. We got it, and it was the first year grant was around $50,000, I believe. And we started the safety net clinic, and it was to provide health care for those who were medically uninsured or underinsured, or underserved. There weren't too many doctors that were in the inner city areas or in rural areas. So that's what the grant was supposed to be for, is to start the safety net so people could access healthcare. So that's how we started. And of course, over the years, this is 36 years later, over the years, healthcare policies have changed, reimbursement structures have changed. It went from basically a productivity reimbursement structure to what they call a value-based reimbursement structure these days. So it's the quality of the healthcare that we deliver is what we get paid on, which does make a lot more sense. But anyway, so that's kind of, without going into a huge amount of details, that's what it's about. So we've grown that one little health center into we have 10 sites now. We're getting ready to build an 11th site. I've always believed in the integrative approach. So you're an orthodontist, so I'm sure you understand, and probably most of the audience understands the importance of the fact that the teeth is not separate from the body, the mind is not separate from the body. So we have all those specialties, if you will, within one roof type of thing. So it's a one-stop shop. So we have dentists that work, side by side with our medical folks, side by side with our behavioral health counselors. And the integrative approach works really well. I've written papers on it, and it's been published, and it shows great outcomes.
There's something also about that collaborative effort as the professional, just really enjoying that community to be able to serve your patients better.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And we have all kinds of data to support that this is really a good way of doing it.
Yeah.
So this 11th site on the south side of town that I want to build is, I want to take a little bit of different approach. So my background again is a physician, but 36 years later, I realized that one of the big things that's missing in terms of healthcare delivery is that we don't address social determinants of health very well. Mm-hmm. And so many people don't really understand what that term means, but the social determinants of health are what are the sociological things that's causing disease in people? So that south side happens to be a food desert area. So the folks that live there don't have ready or great access to fresh produce, fresh foods, and so forth. So a lot of their foods come from, or food sources come from the quick shops, the convenience stores. And like I always say, hey, that's the good tasting stuff. You got the Twinkies, the Ho-Hos, you got chips, you got all these things that taste good, but they're not good for you. Well, we know that those types of food leads to obesity. And we also know that obesity is the gateway to a lot of the chronic diseases, and hypertension, heart disease, even certain cancers. So we know this. So the basic hypothesis is if we can control some of the sociological issues that causes disease, then can we improve these people's lives, make them healthier? And I think we can. But we all know that's not a traditional model of healthcare delivery, but I want to explore that. And the way I'm going to do it is, so I bought a building, I bought some land with it, and I want to put greenhouses next to it so that we as providers can write on a script, hey, you know what? Take this over to the greenhouse and get some fresh vegetables. So we're gonna try that out. We're gonna build a community center there where we'll have a full kitchen, and we're gonna bring in guest chefs locally to do teach cooking classes to cook, more healthy and tasty and those kinds of things, so that people will also learn how to cook a little bit better as well. So, and then the other part is we want to engage the community into this. We want them to come in and volunteer at the greenhouse or the outdoor gardens that we're going to have.
Very cool. Very cool. Oh, it's so exciting. I love the ingenuity and the creativity. And now I'm getting a little bit of a spark of how this is your 11th location, because
Yeah.
it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, every time there's a chance to grow a little bit more, you dip into this creativity and excitement and passion to
Yes.
be able to expand further. So my
Right.
question is, how, when you are running such an enormous business, which all
Mhm.
my listeners who are business owners can only begin to fathom how you've grown
Mhm.
so enormously over 36 years, how do you still yourself, Ron, find the time or the energy or the capability to dip into that passion and refine that focus that gets you excited, that gets you lit up so that you can have the creative sparks?
Wow, that's a tough question. But my immediate answer is that's what drives me. It's the sparks and the passion. And if I don't do the things that I really like doing, like I still write. I'm working on 2 books now, 2 more books, because they kind of energize me.
Mm.
Talking about it with you energizes me. It's like, wow, I mean, I could talk to you forever on this topic type of thing, and I'm sure you don't want to listen forever, but anyway, I don't know how I find the time. I am one of these early risers. I get up around 4 or 5 in the morning. I do my workout every single morning. That's what starts my day. And I think it's efficiency. I think, I don't, it's not an overt efficiency. I mean, I don't write outlines or anything like that down. It just kind of happens. I know at the beginning of the day, I know what I need to do. I have certain goals. I'm going to do these 3 things today. Nothing impossible, but once you get them done, that kind of energizes you too when you get things done.
Mm.
The thing that hampers me most of the day is meetings. That part I can't control too much, but the meetings really wear me out. But then when I get home, I'll go for a quick jog or something, and that re-energizes me. Oh, and
Mm.
that is one thing. The concept of forest bathing. Have you heard that? Okay, so
Absolutely.
I
Ikigai.
do
Yeah.
that. I do that quite a bit through the day, like or through the week, I should say, because I don't do it every day. But if I find an hour here and there, I'll go to the park, which is nearby, and then I'll just go into and it resets me.
Yeah.
And I think so. I think to answer your question, I don't know. I think the time just comes. I don't purposely go out and schedule these times to do things for myself. It just kind of happens, and I think it's through efficiencies. But the efficiencies are derived from doing the things that you like doing, I think, if
It
that
sounds like
makes any
it
sense.
does. And it sounds
Yeah.
like you've also incorporated a really good habit pattern of focusing on those opportunities during the day. You've put
Yes.
yourself in a place where it's easy to get to that forest, it's easy to
Yes.
get to the woods, and
Yes.
then actually going and doing it. And what's so interesting, because I think what traps many business owners, especially as they become more and more successful and up level the demand on them, is
Mm-hmm.
that at any one point, things can go wrong. In fact, the more businesses you own, the more
Right.
buildings you own, it's almost guaranteed that there is going to be a failure
Mm-hmm.
on someone's part.
Mm-hmm.
How do you approach failures? Not only on your part, but on your team's part, on the people who are
Mm-hmm.
working and who you're delegating to. How do you approach the inevitable things that fall
Mm-hmm.
apart during the day?
Well, so the theme of the book that I wrote is based on failures. Yes, so it's I use an acronym. I made up FAME: failures, adversities, mistakes, and enemies, because all these things happen in leadership. And I found, my training is as a physician, so I didn't learn anything about business in med school or anything like that. So,
Yeah.
so a lot of it early on was trial and error, and I used a lot of quotes to get me through, like, hey, it is what it is. Okay, so just let it go and just move forward. Those kinds of things. But anyway, so over time, I've learned to embrace failures. I'm okay with it. I accept it, and I think that's the trouble with a lot of people is failures are embarrassing, right? Most people are embarrassed to admit failure or mistakes and so forth. But I've taken the approach, and I teach my team to take the approach. Okay, I'll use just a lay term, screw up. Hey, if you guys screw up, okay, accept it, recognize it, number one, and then accept it, and then learn from it. And then, what are you going to do differently next time so this doesn't happen? And so I think I don't look at failure as a negative or bad thing. Yeah, I can certainly understand if we failed or made a major mistake where there's a significant amount of finances that were lost or somebody got hurt. Like especially in our field, right? There was maybe a malpractice because somebody did something wrong. Well, those are detrimental, but it still happens, and you still got to learn from it. So so don't let it happen again. And the way to prevent it in the future is learn from it. So I don't know. It's as simple as it may be. I think a lot of people have a hard time accepting these failures, adversities, mistakes, and then enemies. I always talk about enemies too, because that's a natural part of leadership. There may be people who disagree with your decisions. There may be people who don't like you because maybe you are successful, or maybe you're not, and they don't agree with things, or maybe they're just jealous, but that's a natural part. But I think you can learn from that too. I've learned a lot from just thinking, oh, why does that person do that? Well, then I realize why, and I learn from it. I'm not a perfect person, of course, and but I think it's important to admit and accept those failures.
Was there ever a failure, an accident, mistake, or an enemy that you had a hard time getting over, that really buried you for a while?
Yeah, probably a long time ago in my teenage years, maybe, when I had maybe girlfriends and stuff and they dumped me, that, those are emotional things,
Yes.
but, part of it is immaturity too at that level. So, you're just moping and that kind of stuff and you just can't get over it. But from a business and medical point of view, there were, yes, there are still instances that I do sometimes purposely recall. A few years ago, we had a lady who came in and had a chest X-ray, and the doctor, long story short, didn't really follow up on it. And anyway, it wasn't until a few months later that another doctor looked through the charts and realized, hey, this X-ray was never followed up, and so they looked into it. And here she had a lung cancer at that point, and when they redid the X-ray, then it had metastasized in that few months. She ended up passing away, and that's a huge mistake. It was one of those poor follow-throughs, and so. Horrible mistake, but we realigned our policies. We realigned closing the loop policies and those kinds of things. And, and hopefully it's avoidable in the future, but it does happen, so, yeah. But yeah, so yes, I do sometimes reflect on some of the mistakes and the failures and the adversities and the enemies, because sometimes I need to remember that. I think it's important to remember.
I think that's such a great point, and I appreciate your transparency with that incident, because I think, especially as healthcare providers, and especially as leaders of healthcare facilities, we're trying to always give the perception that everything's under control all the time and you're safe in our hands. And I think sometimes we do so to the detriment of facing certain
Yes.
things that go wrong, and we try to ignore them or push them under the rug a little bit. So I really appreciate you bringing that forward, but I also want to illuminate that the great attitude that you have perpetuated through your business
Hmm.
didn't allow anybody to now succumb to this fear and guilt about what had happened. Because if you had just buried your head in the sand, you
Right.
wouldn't have gone on to help so many other people and to perfect your processes to be able to support other women who
Yeah.
have similar situations in the
Yeah.
future. So what we need right now is to leverage happiness in the workplace. If you're a leader or manager struggling with retaining team members and frustrated with the current staffing shortage, group coaching for your team is your solution. Christina Unrein and I have partnered together to build a 10-week group coaching workshop for your business, focused directly on increasing happiness and positivity in the workplace. How do we do this? We use the awesome systems you already have in place and support your team members directly with tools for a mindset shift for awareness of their individual power to own their own happiness. Learn how to cultivate accountability for happiness in your team members and guide them with the tools to own their empowerment at work. Turning around workplace culture starts with individuals, and Christina and I are here for you. Email me at tarryn@thebizofhappiness.com if you are ready to make workplace happiness your competitive advantage. I love that example because it is a tragedy. It's an enormous tragedy. It's a loss of a life, but at the same time,
Right.
facing it allows you to be able to save so many others.
Yes. You know, I'm a big believer in good things come from bad. So just a really quick good story that fits in with this topic is, it's a very personal story. My dad had come to me one day. This is many years ago when I was still quite young, not a kid, but I was probably in my early 20s. And he came to me and he was very depressed. And he said if he had any guts, he would kill himself. And okay, I, as a young person with no training of anything, what do you say? And I walked away from him. I turned my back on him. Okay, and he committed suicide. And you talk about guilt. I still to this day I'm not over that incident because I, as a son, turned my back on him. And anyway, so over the years, it came to a point where I knew exactly, I had calculated the exact number of, or exact date that I would be the exact same age as he was when he committed suicide. So I knew that it was going to be in October this one particular year. And I was, as the days came closer to it, I found myself getting more anxious and you know, and I kept thinking these very irrational thoughts like, wow, you know, am I going to be so depressed? Am I going to commit suicide? You know, I mean, it was so irrational. You know, I was fine, but that's what I was thinking. So on the day that I turned the same age as my dad, I had built a koi pond in my backyard and I liked sitting there. Well, it had rained for several days up to that point. And but I still wanted to go and sit there because it was a place of solace for me. So I went and sat, and I'm contemplating about this incident with my dad, and all of a sudden I looked up. This is in October, and the leaves were really brilliant, like brilliant yellow, brilliant orange, reds. And I'm like, why is that? And then I realized that there was a break in the clouds and the sun shone through. And I looked at that as, I know it sounds a little bit fantastic, but it really happened. And I looked at it as kind of a message to me, like, you know, it was a like an epiphany of, you know, I think it's going to be okay. I'm gonna make it through this day, and those kinds of things. Well, the reason I tell this story is because during that same time period, I had read a lot of research paper on the concept called SBIRT, screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment. What it was it's a way of just screening patients, any patients. This had been trialed in emergency rooms, but screening for behavioral health, just like we do for vital signs. There were a series of like 3 or 4 questions. But anyway, I implemented that, realizing that when my dad, if the doctors at the time would have realized that he was depressed, he had diabetes, and that's why he went to the doctors a lot. But if they would have realized and recognized that he had depression at that time, perhaps they could have sent him to the counselors, and maybe he would have been okay. Well, the healthcare system, we typically don't do that. Especially medical doctors, we're not trained that way. We're trained to fix things, fix tangible things, and but we don't delve into mental behavioral health that well. So that's why I brought behavioral health into the organization as part of the integration structure. Wow. And I can tell you, it saved lives. It's improved people's lives. And that's the good thing that came out of my bad incident years ago. Wow. So I think, I don't know why I'm telling you all this, but I think it fits into this conversation.
I think it's beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing that. And, I am so sorry for your loss, but so inspired by your perspective. Yeah. And I honor you for that because, I think it gives everybody who's listening the strength to be able to look at their challenges in their lives as a possible inspiration and support for further greatness that can come. And in your situation, it happened years later.
Yes, exactly. And that's and I became very passionate about it. And then I especially became passionate about it with the kids because I'm a pediatrician, and and there's a whole host of behavioral health issues with kids living in dysfunctional households. And those kids are called ACEs kids, adverse childhood experiences, and I don't know if you've heard that term, but yeah, and these kids are the ones that grow up to become our future drug addicts, or future, depressed people, our future suicide people. So if we can kind of intervene or identify and recognize and intervene at that early in their lives, perhaps we can reset them in the right path to become, better people. But
absolutely. And that happens. Yeah. That's what happened to Tony Robbins. That happens all around us all this time. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, once again, I just honor, number one, that you took the time that day to have that reflection at the koi pond. Once again, there's that same theme of just taking time during your busy day to have that epiphany, to have that connection with your inner wisdom, with spirit, with the universe, with whatever that is, but then to allow yourself to connect with the passion that is behind all the inspiration for continuing with your enormous growth and your success in business.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that. Especially, earlier when you were mentioning about One Health Ohio, you were saying that it's such an integrative perspective on healthcare. And really how important it is for us as leaders, as you're showing us today, to be able to integrate all those aspects of ourselves as well. You're such a great example, Dr. Ron, of taking care of your physical health with all your outdoor activities and climbing mountains, of your mental health, of your emotional health, and then demonstrating for us now your spiritual health as well, and how important all of those aspects are. How do you support your teams and lead your teams in this integrative self-care?
Well, the organization got very complex over the years, not only internally, but how we deal with environment externally, again, with all these policy changes and so forth. So how do I do that? Well, it's a moving target. It's it's constant. That's why I guess I go to a lot of meetings, because we share information, and I'm always a big believer in doing doing what I believe and teaching people what I believe by doing type of thing. So, but we have lots of meetings, and we have lots of discussion. Communication is obviously super important in an organization this large. We have around 200 employees now, and that's starting with we had, the original number was 4. There were 4 of us that started it. And yeah, so it got very complex and so many different levels. So part of it is, I keep using the term efficiencies, but efficiencies to be able to have efficient meetings and so forth. And structure obviously is important. We find ourselves constantly resetting and restructuring. And I think that's an important aspect of personal life too. I always tell people, I have all kinds of little, little words of wisdom, if you will, that I tell people, and most people just roll their eyes, but, especially the young ones. But anyway.
You never know when they're listening.
Yeah, right. So, but we do a lot of just basic communication with each other, and I think it's important also to head off bad things, the so-called difficult conversations. I'm a big proponent in that. Look, don't hide it. Don't pretend that it's not there. Let's just do it. And then there's ways to do it in a nice way, So tell me what's going on, come on, that kind of stuff. But so I believe all those things are, there's a multifaceted reason why things work and things don't work. So I don't know if I answered your question specifically.
No, I think you did. And I think another aspect of it that you do so effortlessly is by, as you mentioned, leading the way you lead your own life. Mm-hmm. So being an inspiration as a leader that way. And I think that influences people without you even knowing it,
There's a chapter in the book about, so the book is about don'ts. So there's don't neglect your health. And that kind of talks about it. Why it's so important to maintain your health. Your health is your priority, I think, because without good health, how do you lead people?
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
So we keep talking about this. The book is called Don't Pick Up All the Dog Hairs, which is a hysterical title. What is that title? Where did that come from? Where's the title from?
So one of my daughters, she was going into the 6th grade, and she was always a great student, but a little bit lazy, so she'd always make a B here or there on her grades. So I challenged her, her name's Abby, and I said, and I call her Abs, she's my mountain climbing partner. So I said, hey, Abs, I said, if you make all A's for the whole year, Daddy will get you anything you want. So she's like, very nonchalantly, she says, okay. And that was it. Didn't talk about it, didn't ask any questions, nothing. So the year goes by, and every quarter she's making all A's. And then now the last quarter, I'm a little bit sweating the bullets, I'm like, oh, like, what does she want? So I said, hey, Abs, what do you want? It looks like you might make all A's. She said, yeah. She says, a dog. I said, oh, okay. So I didn't think too much of it. And then so she gets her last grade, she makes all A's. And I said, okay, so you want Daddy to get you a dog? And she says, yeah. So she pulls out this clipping, a class from the classifieds. There's Labrador Retriever puppies for sale. So we go, and they are cute puppies. And so she picks one out, has huge paws. He's the biggest in the litter, and she calls him Charlie. So Charlie, the dog. So we bring Charlie home, and, it's just such a cute dog. And so the days go by, and I happen to be the primary cleaner of my house. I always like cleaning, and I think a lot, and that's part of the efficiency is when you're doing other things, you can think, and then, like a lot of my writing comes from when I'm cleaning and ideas, and then I write it down. So anyway, so I clean the house every weekend. I clean the house. So, well, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that labs shed a lot of hair. I didn't know that. And Charlie became really big, and he salivated a lot too. So and I go barefooted a lot. So I'm stepping on puddles of, saliva, and there's dog hair everywhere. and I'm finding myself going a little bit crazy. I'm like vacuuming all the time, and then one time this was the moment, the sun's shining through a window, and I see dog hairs floating everywhere. And my medical science mind is thinking, wow, what about all the mites and the danders that's on all these hairs? And I'm breathing that stuff, So I don't think I was OCD, but maybe. So I'm cleaning and cleaning. And one day I realized I'm going nuts. This is stupid, So we're having dinner and I make an announcement. I said, guys, I got something to tell you, And they look up, they're still eating. And I said, I'm quitting the cleaning business. So you guys are on your own now. So they're like, okay. And they start eating. So anyway, so I started going in my backyard and I started building things. I built the koi pond. I built a gazebo. I built a pergola. I built path. I built gardens, and it became beautiful. It was like a park back there. And I didn't know that I could do that. So anyway, the point is that in leadership, so this is a leadership book, the point is that, everybody thinks that leaders have to complete tasks, always be successful, they're going to be aggressive, and no matter what, they're going to win. Well, my suggestion for a good leader is sometimes you have to know when to give up, when to let go. And the letting go is the hard part for most of us leaders, right? Because we got to be leaders because we accomplished things, we could do things. But in this case, sometimes it's okay to let go, because by letting go, I ended up with this beautiful garden in the back, and it became my respite. Whenever I just needed to be in a quiet area, I could go and do things for myself, as you say. And I could think and become even more productive because, my mind's clear. And so I let go of something that I knew I couldn't win, because if I would have gotten rid of the dog, Abby would have been mad at me the rest of her life. So, and Charlie was a popular dog with my kids. So, so the deck was stacked against me.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was a good story. And I use that a lot. It's a good metaphor, for leadership. And it's like, let go sometimes. You don't have to win, and you can't win every single time. And you got to know when to let go, because maybe good things could happen from that. And that's what the story's about. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Wow. That's a great story. I love that. I think that definitely sparks in me some great insight into things that can be let go. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Ron, what is your superpower?
I don't know. Maybe the superpower would be the ability to see the forest instead of the trees, because I've always been able to see the big picture of things, and by seeing the big picture, I knew what direction to go. As you know, most of us professional folks in medicine, dentistry, the sciences, we tend to be tree people, right? Because we know that every little detail about the Krebs cycle, right? We know that. But sometimes these ultra tree people can't see the forest. So I would say if I had to call myself having a superpower, maybe that's it. I can see things that others can't.
Yeah, definitely a great leadership skill. Yeah, I love it. And what would you say then your definition of happiness is?
Peace and contentment. Just having peace in my life. And you have to work for it. It just doesn't come. Right. And I think for me personally, it's about, I have a daily workout routine. I work out every single day, no matter what. And they can be as simple as just doing a set of stretching exercises or some push-ups or abdominals or something like that. But I run, like this morning, I ran 4 miles. But I think all those things tend to gravitate towards giving you a piece of life. and we know scientifically and physiologically that it does, help you with calmness. And I think there's a whole bunch of evidence about improving your mind structures and those kinds of things.
Absolutely. And it takes perspective as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the truth is the world is not a very peaceful place, but
No,
it
it's
does take enormous perspective to see the peace within it.
Yes. Yeah. That's a major challenge for sure. Yeah.
Oh, this is so great. So great to hear all your perspective on success and business and the healthcare profession. And thank you so much for enlightening us and giving us some of those stories from your personal life. How can my audience find you and support you, and how can they find your book? We'll put all the links in the show notes, but if anybody's driving, listening to this podcast, tell us how we can find you, Dr. Ron.
Well, yeah, the links are the easiest, but I did just write this book, and the book is based on a lecture series that I did for local medical school for 25 years. Yes, and that 25, 30 years ago, they asked me to do a lecture on leadership because I had been a CEO here for a number of years. So I did, but I had no idea what to talk about. And one day I was talking about a major mistake that I made. Yeah. And people were nodding and they were like, yeah, I've done that too. And it turns out that, it was a familiar thing to a lot of people and they could relate. So I started coming up with a series of all these failures, adversities, mistakes, and it became this popular lecture series. And they gave me awards and everything. So anyway, that's how I ended up writing the book. They were handouts for a while, so people could read before the talks, and we could discuss them. But the handouts ended up becoming this book. So the book is available everywhere. It's on Amazon. It's that's probably the main thing. But all the bookstores have it and have them and so forth. But I have a personal website, Ron Dwinnells, the name, .com. It's real simple. But that has some of my cool mountain climbing pictures. You got to see some of them are really, really cool. And it has a story about my background because I grew up as a child in quite adverse situations. Yeah, so it's a pretty good story. I reread it a few days ago. It's like, yeah.
Pretty good story. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Business of Happiness podcast today. I appreciate it. And I know that my audience will appreciate your insight. I was wondering if you could leave us today with one sentiment of impact on leadership. If all this incredible work that you've done and the 36 years that you've put into understanding and defining and writing, it sounds like you've been writing for 36 years. If all of that were to disappear and you could give us just one moment of impact in terms of what leadership looks like to you, what would you say to my audience?
Passion. Yeah, to me, that would be the one word thing to explain it. A lot of people, as we all know, don't really know what the purpose of their lives are. And I'm a big believer in, if you're going to do something and do it right, you have to be passionate about it. There's a number of people who are leaders, but they're not really passionate about it. They have ulterior motives. We know that. But are you really passionate about helping your patients? Am I really passionate about doing this and so forth? And yeah, and that becomes my purpose. So passion is to me is one of the main keys and ingredients to becoming a good leader. And even the bad leaders, some of those have passion, and that's they're bad leaders from a social perspective, but they're passionate and they're good at what they do. So that would be my takeaway, I guess, as you'd say. So
that's
passion.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Ron.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, I can't believe we're done already.
I know. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
Well, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. I highly recommend you check out Dr. Ron's book, Don't Pick Up All the Dog Hairs. And until next time, please remember, when you feel good, that's when you can do good. Bye-bye.
Bye.